anybody have a chance to check out the zoning map?
Yes.
I had, somebody sent me this thing that had 100 pages of stuff to look at, so I didn't look at the zoning map.
Did I sign you up for that committee? Oh, no, you volunteered for that. More appropriate than normal. Call to order the City of Plymouth Planning Commission. We have a roll call.
Connor.
Here.
Ben Hunsaker.
Here.
Josiah Jessen.
Present.
Tim Malott.
Here.
Darlene Rose. Here. And I do not see Ruth Causey or Don Barlow, and Haley Green requested to be excused.
Thank you. Approval of minutes from April 1st and April 15th. Questions, discussions, or motions?
I was curious why we're approving both sets of minutes tonight. Did you not approve the first while I was absent on the last meeting?
No.
Okay.
Well, on the second, what minutes, the 15th? Yeah, line,
Oh yeah.
39.
Yeah.
At the very end of it, it should say listed in the,
Oh, that's
not in,
That's the Scrivener's correction.
that's perhaps the most critical correction
I know.
possible.
I'll move to approve both of those minutes. April 1st and April 15th.
All in favor?
Aye.
I did have a question for staff though. I was going back to review the April 15th meeting that I was absent. It's great that we have the minutes with us, at least a start time. It'd be great if the video on YouTube also had that somewhere on the overlay where the meeting minutes lined up with the video, because I kept trying to follow the discussion with what was not all recorded in the minutes, so I don't know if that's possible or not.
Just the times when we transition between topics.
I don't know.
If
Whatever you can do.
If I insert into YouTube, if I say 6:02, it's going to take you to the 6th minute of the meeting.
Second.
Yeah.
Whereas what I would typically do is 6:02 is the 2nd minute of the meeting. So I put in 2:00 to create that correlation. I realize it's a little weird, but that is kind of the best I can do with YouTube. I'm not a pro at it.
Yeah, I was just.
But at the very least, usually I have the markers in there for the different topics.
Okay.
It's in the information section of the
Right.
YouTube.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
And did you get the second for that motion for the minute?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got the motion from Brennan
Second from Tim.
and the second from Tim to approve both sets.
It went quick, I was just making sure. And we have a late arrival.
Good evening.
We approved the minutes.
I said to Gary, no, I didn't. I have no excuse whatsoever.
Here it is.
Doing legs.
Strong headwind.
Exactly.
They knew it.
Excuse.
Right, our next item of business is the residential section of the comprehensive plan review. We'll leave that off. This is going to go to our guest speaker here, Justin Peterson and Nick Metzler are here from Council of Governments. And if you recall, they were here a few months ago. Has it been long? A few months ago, and talked through a little bit on the need to go through the city's code and audit it to make sure that it's compliant with climate-friendly areas. So they've done that, and this is them reporting back. So I'll turn it to them and let them kind of talk through what they found.
So this, in your packet, we kind of have the information kind of the code and code changes. So back in March, Nick and I were here and we kind of went through what the kind of climate friendly area rules mean and kind of what is required by the state rules. And now we're trying to take that and translate it into actual code text edits, and then hopefully be able to take these and kind of merge them with kind of all the other efforts that you're currently working on through the code updates. My hope is kind of after this meeting is to send kind of our draft that we put together to DLCD for any initial comments. But we have the timeline again on these code updates is that they have to be complete by the end of the year. DLCD timeline, Department of Land Conservation and Development. That's their timeline for cities to get these code updates completed. I don't have a presentation today, but what I wanted to do was walk through the text edits that you all have in your packet, I think. So the first section, there's a few definitions. So there's some new definitions, and those definitions are intended to answer some of the questions that Planning Commission members had at the last meeting and make sure things are all defined within the code. I think one of the things that came up was auto-oriented uses. So that was actually, there's some definition in your existing code, but then I took some of the DLCD language that was in the transportation planning rules to merge that into your existing the city's existing definition. So it means the use or activity where automobiles and or other motor vehicles are an integral part of the use or accessory to the primary use, including repair shops and drive-through services. Auto-oriented land uses include uses related to operation, sale, maintenance, and fueling of motor vehicles. So that would be the proposed definition. And then there was some question about the area net, so that's also now defined. Yeah, go ahead.
Good question about that definition.
Yeah.
It says or accessory to the primary use. And it seems to me that an automobile can be accessory to everything any human being does in this country. I'm just, that part just confuses me.
Accessory to the business purpose?
Yeah, I think it's more intended to be towards the business purpose. But that is a good point that any retail business could, or other business could have someone that drove to that business.
Or delivered something, or, anything.
I can double check to see if that portion was directly from the LCD's code, just to confirm. But that's something I'll check.
It seems to me that we could just strike or accessory to the use because it's integral or it's not integral.
Well, we had a discussion a couple months ago about drive-throughs and how a restaurant might be fine if they didn't have a drive-through in these regions. If that would make it accessory to the business. More so.
What if the restaurant does delivery service, so they have delivery cars that are coming and going from their business?
That's a good
I
question.
would say that would be accessory to the primary use. Do we want to allow that in the climate-friendly area? Or would that could be considered automobile-oriented use if you have a delivery vehicle coming to and from your business?
Or if it's bike delivery, would we be banning car delivery?
Or DAX.
And that's exactly why I think we should leave it to integral, so that if you can do it without a vehicle, it's okay. If you can't have a car wash without allowing cars. So that's integral.
And in the definition, you've already got the word drive-through, so that takes care of that.
As far as that part of it, yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, let's double check, see what's in the model language from DLCD, and or if that's not specifically in there, we can pull it. And if it is in there, we'll need to maybe expand on the definition a little bit to.
I mean, Chris's example, I think that it wouldn't, the delivery thing probably isn't integral.
Right.
But accessory, yeah. But it's like he had mentioned to do with the use of the business, not the people that may go there.
Yeah, I mean, the other example I would think of would be less like a restaurant, but say a bakery in the downtown area that had a delivery truck show up at 6:30 in the morning, they loaded it up and it was gone for the rest of the day. That may be 30% of the sales for the operation, so it may be integral to the business, but it's not really an accessory use of that primary use, which is restaurant. The bakery portion with the one delivery first thing in the morning is not really an integral part of that.
Right.
As far as a land use standpoint, it may be integral to the business operations, but,
Right.
so, yeah, we'll just need to look at that definition. I think the intent is you don't want automobile-heavy industries, businesses in your downtown core or in your
Yeah.
climate-friendly areas, right? We're trying to remove the necessity for excessive amounts of vehicle trip in and out of the area, so just defining that a little bit more clearly.
One amendment I would suggest is to add fueling or charging of motor vehicles. That's going to become more predominant in the coming years.
Yeah,
I want to backtrack too, and just a comment on motor vehicles are an integral part of the use or accessory to the primary use. If you delete or accessory to the primary, I'm not sure you don't want to leave primary in there. I don't want to consider when you look at where that language came from. It looks to me like as originally drafted, there's some distinction being made between an integral part of the use or accessory to the primary use. That primary is in there for a reason. I want to make sure we don't lose that. Modify integral. It does seem to modify accessory.
No, that makes sense, and yeah, I'll double check the DLCD language, and because there might have been when kind of because we took partial of the existing city language and then added the DLCD language, and I just wanted to remember kind of what was existing and then what is being added to the definition.
I do have a question about the very first one, the pathway.
Yes.
That doesn't look like a or a definition at all. I mean, it's just kind of saying you can go to the transportation planning rule and that's what the definition is. And maybe that's okay to do that, but I don't, it just seems like it'd be nice if it was there.
Yeah, and I found with that definition, so above we delete out a duplication that's there, but then later in the code, and I believe this is in there, pathway, walkway, accessway, defined all together. But the second accessway that was proposed to be deleted above was just a duplication. But yeah, that definition, I had to note that that's existing within the current code, so no changes were proposed there, but we could update that language.
Well, but it doesn't say what you cut out, which that helps.
Did it translate? I'm sorry, I'm looking at the Word doc, not the packet. Let's
Oh, well, the access way. It says a walkway or multi-use path connecting two rights of way to one another where no vehicle connection is made. And that was just the access way. But wouldn't well, I don't know about a walkway, but a pathway would be the same sort of thing. It just, there was some other thing that we had a while back that made me think of that.
Yeah, and I guess another option would be that you take those three, pathway, walkway, access way, and maybe split out access way and define it separately from pathway and walkway.
I wouldn't bother.
Because the city had
There's,
the existing definition of access way.
unless there's a need to define it as something separate.
Well, but my point was that it doesn't really define it, what's there. It's just saying you can use a pathway or multi-use pathway to satisfy the requirements.
Well,
of the transportation planning rule. That's not a definition.
it is if you change maybe to the word is. So then you have to go to that rule, and anything that satisfies that rule is by definition a pathway, walkway, or access.
That's true.
I think that was the intent.
Okay. But do we want to have to go there? That's, I guess, the question. I mean, you make a good point on the is as opposed to may.
Yeah. If it says may, it's not really a definition.
Do we know what, like, the transportation planning rule, I mean, is it like a whole page of stuff? What, their definition of it?
In before, how long that piece is, I'm not sure.
Well, maybe to look at that, and it, yeah, if it's a half a page long, yeah, you don't want to have to go that long definition, but if it's just a line, a sentence, you could just put the sentence in there.
The transportation rules themselves are 75 pages long, but then
We wouldn't want to do that.
yeah, that section is shorter.
Yeah, if that's a definition, if there's a definition there, you know, in that BTR. Or
Better to have it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay.
About a page and a half then. 1865-030. It's all this and this.
And that's the description or the definition.
That's the section for pedestrian and bicycle access and circulation. So within there it defines,
All those things.
that is the definition you're asking about. And then when we're referring to that as a pathway, walkway, or access way, that's what we mean. So that's, I mean, it's kind of circular, but it is
The OAR.
plus the OAR.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Then leave this, yeah.
And the OAR is several pages.
Okay, I'm fine.
I'm sure those points have been argued for many.
We just need enough there that when somebody starts to argue with us, we can point them to that.
Yeah, that's all.
We didn't make it up. They did.
All right.
All right.
So the next definition was, I guess, two that kind of go together: area net and floor area ratio, to define those within the code. Were there any questions on those two?
My only comment on area net means that we're talking site area net. We're not talking building area net, where in our code, we're gonna be talking about building area net. It's gonna have a different definition, because when we get into dealing with areas of planning within the building itself. So because it's gonna be integrated into the code with inside the building, it needs to be area net, maybe in parentheses, the word site, just that it's not used to interpret the area net of a building, even though it's clearly that it's site, but we're using the same terms. That's my only comment.
Do you think we need another definition for building?
Well, it is, it's somewhere in there. If we go through the definition, there's building net in there. Is somewhere, I seem to remember, and if I stand mistaken under definitions, and I haven't gone back to look in, but I believe it's area net and area gross is both used. Because at different times you use the net of the building, and other times you use the net of the building.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's why this area net needs to be relating to site, not to the building itself.
It looks like if we have a building area net, that's the phraseology, it's not in the old
It's the word building with it,
area net.
or say building area net.
There's no building area net.
But there's area net.
It might be in the new document.
Yeah.
But it's
You're
not
in the definitions?
Yeah, but this
Okay.
is the old code, not the updated document we're working in.
All right.
So we might need to create that.
Yeah.
Another.
If it's in the language, if it's actually used in the language of the code,
Yeah,
which was part of what I was trying to go through that
yeah,
100 pages that we had a
That
while
sounds
back.
like an
They're
exercise.
gonna have
for
to go
Chase.
back into that exercise at some point.
It does though, right after area net, it does say means the total area of the development side.
Yeah.
So, but your point is to have it right up front.
Yeah, put it in parentheses, the word site. That means, the language in the code can actually be area net, and not area net site. When you're using the term area net, you can use area net, and you're talking about the site. But when you're going down your list of your definitions and reading through them, then with the parentheses, the site, or the parentheses, the building behind it, then it'll help get away of any confusion. That's all, you know. And I'm not hard pressed on this either, but I think it'll be a help and clarification.
Is area net the whole term? Because it's got area, comma, net, and then one quote. And I'm just, the way that it appears there.
I think it was the second quotation mark just got dropped off on accident. What we had was just area, comma, net. But could potentially add site in front of that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Ready for the next question?
Yeah.
On floor area ratio, it's the gross area of the building excluding what it excludes. And then it says to the gross area of the development site, but shouldn't it be to the net area of the development site? Rather than, because the net area is defined above, excludes public right-of-way, parks, spaces.
Oh, that's a good question. And this definition, floor area ratio, that's directly from their definitions in the new transportation planning rules. So that's where that one got pulled from. But that's a
Doesn't make sense.
very good question. Yeah.
Okay. Those we get very different results.
I can check with that when I send an email to them.
That on the second line where it starts excluding, that doesn't answer what she was asking.
No, because that's all the area of the building.
But she was talking about parking and stuff like that.
Well, but that's within the building
Yeah.
versus outside the building.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I guess you're right, yeah.
I'm getting down into this too, because when you calculate because I'm back on the net of the building and the gross of the building, since it's being used here. The gross of the building, you've got the net of the building, which is, you have the gross, which is the overall to the outside walls. The outside of perimeter of the foundation, and the outside of each floor is your gross area. Your net area is you're taking away all the circulation, you're taking away the restrooms, you're taking away elevators, you're taking away stairs, you're taking away,
Parking.
you're taking away parking if it's inside. So now what we've got here is we've now got a third definition of how to calculate the building
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
And that's,
And it calls it gross, which is really gross minus.
yeah.
It's gross.
Yeah, it's a mess. And since real estate people will lease the building based on a proportion, a ratio between the amount of space they actually get to their portion of the overall gross of the building, those numbers become very critical, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
we've got another whole definition in here in the middle of all
It
this.
doesn't.
And I don't understand why, because they use the term leasable in here. The total leasable floor area of the building, I mean, is it the net usable or is the net leasable based on what a legal lease is in the real estate world? And so it's, I mean, I get what they're trying to say about the 2.0. I don't understand why you just don't leave it with the gross of the building and pull out any parking, because parking is never considered part of the net square footage. Again, you're shaking your head, John.
No, I was shaking my head to agree with you. No, it wouldn't be.
No, so I don't have a problem with taking out the word parking, but when you start throwing the word circulation in there, that's another whole animal.
Well, it's vehicle parking and circulation. It's not pedestrian circulation.
Is
Parking
that,
on drive.
I have that confusion.
I can read it both ways.
Right.
I would add the word vehicle in front of circulation if that's really what it is, then it takes away all the confusion.
Yeah.
But,
Or the word leasable so that you're not wondering about hallways and elevators.
So, can I just throw this out there before we go too far splitting hairs?
I know, I'm sorry.
The verbiage for these new definitions, are we saying we pulled them directly from,
DLCD.
so this is DLCD's verbiage that they reviewed and checked, and that's their definition?
That's what was in the transportation planning rule, and I can.
So we run the risk, if we change their verbiage and they figure out, oh my gosh, we miscalculated the gross net building area, whatever, and they go back and rechange their definition, then we'll have to review ours to make sure it matches with whatever they change it to if that happens. So
We need clarification.
oh, definitely.
I have a question. What use is the
Agree with that.
negative floor area ratio? Is it elsewhere in the code that's going to have significance?
In these new rules and law, there are rules as it relates to the density of the building to the site, and that's where this is coming from.
So is that what the procedure is? We're gonna come up with a list of questions, go back to DLCD, and before we integrate this into our code, is that the process?
I can bring these questions to DLPD. We have until December of this year to actually adopt the code language.
I mean, particularly on that one, you're right, what you said, I mean, but we couldn't ask them, well, this doesn't make sense, or tell them, and we should say why.
Yeah, before we adopt it in our code, and then have to change it if they change.
So on this one, Justin, we have concerns about the term gross. We have concerns about the term circulation. We have concerns about the term leasable. And I would add in net area as well in there that seems to be missing that you would think would be in there somewhere. Those are the big three that make this very confusing.
Nick agrees.
Well, I was going to add in, you know, you all may be the first ones to really dive deep into this code. And so if there's questions, I think we just make a big list and ask DLCD. I think our region's at the beginning, or I should say further ahead than some of the other cities across the state. And I think, we can ask DLCD, and if they'll give us guidance one way or the other. And I don't, yeah, and then we don't need to overthink it. I think maybe they didn't do a great job vetting the code with folks before they kind of wrote it into rule. So, we can ask and get clarification.
Thank you.
Good to break down.
All right. Does that bring us to the really simple definition of a climate-friendly area?
We all,
No, I won't read that full definition, but again, that's from ELPD's definition of a climate-friendly area, but think of a downtown mixed-use area as kind of what they're defining as a climate-friendly area.
I would like to ask one question about it. The thing that just really confused me about that is where it said, provided with abundant tree canopy and vegetation. That seems to be contrary to the building height and density goals of a climate-friendly area.
Yeah, I think maybe that's getting out for new development. I think they're looking at there will be streetscape standards.
Well, but even
abundant might be.
But even so,
yeah.
When you get that density and building height, you don't have abundant tree canopy and vegetation. That's just incompatible.
that's what the roofs are for.
Yeah. Oh, I guess you can put them all on the roofs.
No, you're right. I mean, they want it as compact as possible.
Yeah.
It filled up with buildings.
Maybe our perspective on abundant is different than
Yeah, I think
urban dwellers' perspective on
the
abundant.
abundant added in there might be unnecessary.
Yeah. All right.
Forest or the Starker Forest, just west of town, seems to have an abundant amount of trees on it.
Yes. Or even
Canopy is
residential.
probably not even, shouldn't even be there.
Yeah.
Maybe say with a few trees.
maybe street in Corvallis.
Maybe put a tree or two.
All right, we should move on. Sorry.
I circled a bundle, so we'll see what they say. All right. Strike that.
Do you want to say anything about parking?
No, I'm not touching parking. I'm waiting till we get to later that
Yeah, there is-
we have to allow duplexes on all residential lots. I'm waiting for that. Wherever that comes.
And so kind of moving on from the definitions, the focus here is the overlay portion of the code that we had talked about. So the role of this overlay district is it would essentially apply to anything within the CFA boundary. I have a note in there that says insert final map, just if there are any changes to the boundary, but ultimately whatever the final adopted CFA boundary is kind of what we applied to this node.
Right.
I try to keep it overall relatively a short overlay district. Ultimately, I think the code reference there, the 18.55, might have to change just pending your code updates because you haven't, I believe it's your natural hazards overlay district. I think there's some benefit of having this as a separate overlay district within the code. There's some leeway on kind of where it gets defined and put within the final code. So that second reference of 5.5 could change. But the code language would be the same.
But defining the area by a picture of a map is suitable. Will not be in the language to define the area.
I think ultimately we would want the map with the bounds of the street, kind of in conjunction with each other. I think would be best. Yeah, that's a good point. The final, once we have, if this is the final or if it changes, we can define it by the streets.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon to have hazard areas or other zones defined by a map though within our.
Yeah, that's why I was asking.
It's sometimes tough to do that because sometimes they go through the middle of a lot or
Yeah.
elsewise. So maps are generally used to define areas is fine.
Just have one question for this page. I mean, we have pages, page by page. Section 1855, 80, 90, and 100. Are those left blank on purpose? We're gonna fill those in, or is it just kind of a remnant?
It was left if there's other sections that we need to add. Right now, that's not going to create a confusion, but if there were additional sections, those would they would be labeled.
Makes sense.
And then I think the purpose and the boundary is relatively straightforward. The purpose is the shorter. It's just a piece of that CFA definition used there. And then the boundary, kind of what the target is the 25 acres again. So ultimately, if the boundary did change, we'd still need to meet the 25 acres and the 750 foot width. And then there's the next section is the allowed use requirements. So essentially, regardless of what the underlying zone allows, all of these uses would be allowed within the CFA boundary. So the CFA has a few zones within it, the C1. Right now, the current residential, some C2, and then the R3. Is it R2? Either R3 or R2.
I have a question about the boundary. If you have adjacent residential districts that qualify so that they can, where's the CFA requirement? Are those within the boundary or outside the boundary?
So on the south end of the boundary, those two.
Well, either way, if those are part of, they're not as commercial, they're more residential, but they can be included in order. Yeah, you got to be within the boundary in order to count towards the 25 acres.
Yeah, it would have to be within the boundary to count towards the 25 acres. So there's on the south side there, Philomath Boulevard. There's the two, you could call them the blocks of residential that are within the CFA boundary. But in this case, with the overlay, now those essentially are allowing other uses besides residential.
I just have a comment on 1855-030C. It refers back to 1855. It doesn't make any sense.
No, and that's.
I know it's highlighted right here. So it's
that,
going to be worked on.
the old non-conforming reference was 1855, but I think there's a new reference for the
So
non-conforming.
the reference needs to be pointed somewhere. Okay. Of how to
I've
adjust
got
that.
the text here. Basically, existing non-conforming.
And the goal, I think this discussion came up a little bit in the meeting in March around pre-existing uses. So we wanted to make it really clear, because even if this reference wasn't there, the pre-existing non-conforming section would still apply. But just to make it really clear that that's.
Thank you.
But yeah, that reference needs to be updated, and I believe the streetscape standards reference is also changing with some of the code updates, so that we'll need to make sure correct.
So you're indicating with the LCD, that's okay, pre-existing, leaving that in there?
Yeah, they legally couldn't.
Even then couldn't take it out?
Change what's
Okay.
pre-existing with land use law, kind of what's
That's,
yeah.
You're right. Yeah. Gotcha.
And then the next section's on building height. So I guess the main, I changed under C, it's highlighted, because how DLCD had referred to it was a little odd, so I changed it to allowed height. Buildings in the CFA shall be allowed to be up to 50 feet in height. That doesn't mean I think we talked about it a little bit, every building would have to be that 50 feet, but it's a allowed height of 50 feet. And then that single story language in subsection D there, that's actually pulled from your existing code in the C1 zone. So that's kind of recognizing for single story buildings, trying to create that character within downtown for the height scape kind of aligning.
That's going to be on my short list, not to sidetrack too much, but we're getting a lot of pushback on that outside of the downtown core and our C2. This has become a very
20 feet.
challenging standard for people to meet in the C2 in general.
Cornice, yeah.
So we may look at pulling that back into your downtown commercial, but to not require that of the C2 areas. But we'll deal with that later.
Support of that.
Shorter than 20 feet high?
Yeah, it's
Single story. There's a lot of commercial property, future commercial property owners that don't want to be landlords. They don't want to have residential up above.
Oh,
And if they're 5 blocks off of the downtown area, right now the code kind of forces it, or they're doing an artificially tall 1-story building that doesn't really look like a 2-story building either.
yeah.
Anyway, something to talk about there.
And then kind of going back to the subsection B, that multifamily buildings located in the underlying C1 zone shall include bottom floor commercial. So it's trying to ensure that for your core C1 zones, your core downtown, kind of as it's defined right now, maintains that bottom floor commercial for multifamily. But then other areas would, for multifamily development, would it be allowed, but they'd have to meet the minimum. Multifamily meet the minimum density standard of the 15 units per acre. Again, we talked about this a little bit, but the one weird caveat that DLCD had put in was the attached single family, which you can't require the bottom floor commercial for attached single family, so townhomes, and that's just what it was in DLCD's code, and that's something I can bring up again when I send them kind of the email with the.
Just remind them that contradicts, and so they should just exclude row houses in the required allowed uses in the CFA in order to be consistent with their own code. Yeah, because this is a really important part of protecting the commercial districts within climate-friendly areas, and it's completely contrary to townhomes or row homes in the downtown or in that CFA. They should be removed. Still pushing for it.
And I think for some of the larger cities, it might make sense for some of their secondary climate-friendly areas, because like Corvallis and Albany, they have multiple CFAs, and it might make sense that the secondary one, that's an allowed use, but not the primary. I'll note that again. Email to them.
Yeah, I mean, what literally just this section alone, what it makes me want to do is pick up our proposed climate-friendly area and just move it as far to the west end of town as possible, where it can't screw anything up for our downtown core.
Right.
Which is exactly contrary to what DLCD is trying to get cities to do, right? But that's the knee-jerk reaction. It's just like, I don't want this to screw up our downtown core. We only have one town commercial district. So we'll just put all of this down at the far end, and we'll develop our downtown commercial district the way we want it to be developed. And we'll establish a climate-friendly area on the west end of town, and so you can monkey with that on the far west end of town. You're not going to do it to the downtown core.
That's what Albany did.
So and I'll just postmark that by saying, when we were first discussing climate-friendly and equitable areas, we didn't know about a lot of these provisions, right? These have kind of rolled out as the rules have rolled out, and it's gotten more and more stringent on some things and more lenient on other things, and all of a sudden the areas we were originally looking at don't look so attractive anymore. So, and again, it really bothers me to think we're gonna lose downtown commercial space to townhomes because there's a hot housing market right now. And 10 years from now, when the housing market cools, we're gonna be looking around going, why do we have houses in the middle of our downtown and we're trying to get stores and retail and everything there, and the space has all been filled in with townhouses. So I think it's a disservice to these communities, but.
Jumping to the density standards, so section A, there's no maximum residential density for the areas, and then for residential uses, there'd be a minimum, and this is, that's the DLCD language, minimum density standard of 15 units per acre. And then for mixed use buildings, that's the floor, where the floor area ratio comes in. We talked a little bit in March about how there was the 2.0 floor area ratio, the standard path versus the alternative path where you can do the 1.0 floor area ratio. And I want to clarify, I have a comment in there where the 60,000 square foot note comes in. So basically we need to prove that under our development code, you could at least have a zone building capacity of at least the 60,000 square feet per net acre, which is interesting because that's actually could end up less than the 2.0 floor area ratio. So I think in initial conversations with them, I think we can prove that we can meet that, and then we only have to apply the 1.0 floor area ratio in the code, which is less restrictive, which I think would be make more sense for a smaller city. So that's something where either that language needs to be in the code, or we need to put it in the findings when we're writing the staff report. So that could be, I don't think there's a good existing example, but basically proving that it could happen or could be built.
Question it's almost for Chris, I guess. That A and B, does that go against what you were discussing? Just because it's talking about residential, no maximum residential density, nor, or that the minimum has to be 15 units. Does that go against what you were concerned about with the multifamily?
No, because you can hit these densities with second, third, and fourth story residential. My beef all along has been giving up first level commercial space to residential uses.
Yeah. I just was wanting to make sure.
I have no problem with first floor commercial and going up 2-3 stories with residential. That's what our current code encourages. That's all the changes we've been talking about encourage. But to give up that first floor of commercial space in your downtown is not the right direction.
Yeah. The attached single family, not the multifamily.
With the streetscape standards here that need to be updated, but the goal here is not to recreate a much of the language when the city already has streetscape standards. So that's why that reference is just made there instead, because I think I would say when I reviewed through your existing language, especially for commercial multifamily, it seems like it's covered where new development would have a street trees. Maybe not abundant as we talked about, but it would have the streetscape required.
Does that reference look right? Is that gonna need a change?
I haven't got too caught up on the references at this point. We'll have to tweak them when we get to the end of it. It might move around still. We're gonna have a work session where we just go through and check all references with everybody.
Yeah.
Snacks.
And then there's the block layout section here, and this is kind of for new land divisions, and I think the main change or difference from your current code is under subsection B, the maximum block length of 350 feet. I believe your current code it's either 400 or 450. I can't remember off the top of my head. We talked about it a little bit in the March meeting, but it's kind of reducing that maximum block length and ensuring if you have these larger blocks that you'll have a pedestrian pathway. With the existing downtown, you might not have any of these larger block developments where this is going to come up because it'll be more infill. But this is going to directly, the 350 feet is directly from the DLCD model and language.
We're like 370 right now.
Okay. I'd say it was a minor reduction there.
Isn't this greenfield making the CFA bigger in a greenfield format? Where everything that we've got looking in the CFA, all the roads and everything are already in place. So it really doesn't apply to us at all.
Yeah, I mean, with the existing development with the CFA, this might not come up because it would have to be pretty significant redevelopment.
The only place I would see is on the extreme south end of what was currently proposed, that you'd have to put a street through there at the extreme south end of the CFA. Is the only place this might come into play.
Yeah.
Or if the building comes down and they're gonna rebuild new.
Yeah, but our current blocks,
Yeah, you
they
would.
exist, the streets exist.
Oh.
You're not gonna come in, we're talking about inside the CFA.
I thought you were talking about,
No, the only thing I was saying is the south end would be the only place that it might come into play. Or in that. But basically already pre-existing.
yeah, the streets.
Yeah, I would guess that this is not, and it was a minor reduction anyway from the existing. This is kind of the first run at it in terms of the code language, and what we'll do is we'll package all of this together in terms of the questions everyone had and send that to DLCD staff for them to review.
Yes.
Those
One question.
Yeah.
What is the definition of a super block development?
Question, and then
It's elsewhere in the code. It's in a harsh. Yeah. Yeah, we define it.
Must be. I mean, it must be in the new document. It's not in the old code.
Oh yeah, okay. I think it's in your commercial, maybe in your commercial standards. Some on super blocks.
Well, we're not having it in there, so. We can't have it. Oh, you just want to know what it is.
It's in,
And now I'm kind of remembering why, because right now I think it's a conditional use to do a super block within your commercial zone, but then with this new CFA overlay, that it essentially wouldn't be an option to go through the.
It wouldn't be in the definitions because it is its own section.
it's defined under 1840-50 block layout and building orientation.
Okay.
So there's applicability, block layout standards, and the super block development.
That's something that would come before us in an allowed zone. I mean, I get it. We
Yeah,
have to believe
I mean,
the
it's
point.
large developments, think like a large shopping center type thing that was coming in.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, that's the whole overlay. And if there was kind of some talk about last time the overlay, and then also maybe making amendments C1 zone, but if the overlay captures everything, we might not make any changes to the C1 zone, since all of the entirety of the C1 zone is within the overlay right now. That's all I had, and we'll come back at a later. We'll work with Chris to come back at a later meeting after we get some answers from DLCD, and then again, there's some other portions of this project, but mostly right now we're kind of focused on the code updates. But at the last meeting, we talked a little bit about there'll be kind of a memo with some parking review in terms of existing spaces, but we were waiting for a lot of the current development out there to finish before we did the inventory of existing spaces.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Justin. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, you bet. Have a good night.
Can we back up and talk about the titles on the agenda?
Sure.
So we started off with unfinished business. That's not a right title for what we just did. So for our minutes, it should say something different.
Yeah, I don't know how I got that, which was why I was confused when you first went there. I was like, that's not what's first on the agenda.
Yeah, that's what I gathered pretty
Um,
quickly.
Yeah, it's should be the climate friendly area audit review.
Did you catch that, Ruth?
Did you want 3.1 retitled climate friendly area
Audit
audit?
review.
Take care.
Thank you. So now are we ready? So is that a good title? Development Code Residential Section?
Yeah, that one matches.
Okay.
All right, so first and foremost, I have spent a lot of time doing a little bit more background and research, paying a visit to our friends at DLCD and looking at some of their model language. They've actually got a pretty good library of some resources. I provided links there. Just to give you just some of the things I've been looking at. I did put them in kind of order of what I felt was significance or relevance to what we were doing. So hopefully you started at the top and worked your way down and eventually got bored and didn't worry about the ones at the bottom as much. But there's some good value here. Definitely looked at examples, looked at setbacks, looked at widths of lots and quite a bit of information. Did go back and look at King City, looked at City Corvallis. It'll come on before we get to zoning, so we're fine. And then went back in and looked at the notes from the last meeting at the table and some of the questions that were raised there, and went through and made those changes. And so in the pages included in the packet, just pulled in the first kind of 4 or 5 pages of this residential section. I did get the font a little bit bigger so you can see it a little bit more clearly, I think, than what we were using before. I kind of just went through line by line, wordsmithing some of this based on what I had read and what we've talked about. So we can really go page by page if we want to on this. I didn't do track changes in the table. That was way too cumbersome, so I just did the table and we can talk through the table. And so mostly looking for your feedback on this, but I like where it's at. It definitely, generally speaking, keeps some of the stems in the R1. that we're accustomed to, gives a lot of flexibility in the R2 and really opens that up. And then it really puts that high density residential apartments, condominiums into that R3, as we talked about. There's a lot of value in that, I think, from a land use standpoint. I did include an email that I got from Patrick Wingard with DLCD, our DLCD rep, informing us that by new state law, we have to allow for duplexes in all of our residential neighborhoods, including the R1. We already were kind of planning it in the corner lots, but the language is on any lot that's zoned for residential development, you have to allow for duplexes. So not just corner lots, a bit larger than 10,500, which I think it's larger than 10,000, which our code currently says. It's any lot within the R1, you have to allow for duplexes. So the table reflects that change. And then I also included correspondence with maybe it was just that one. Yeah, just added that in there. Yeah, so we can talk through any of the red line changes that people had concern with or liked. And now's probably an appropriate time to also mention Chase isn't here tonight. Chase doesn't work for us anymore. So we've issued notice for a new planner, hoping to keep the same arrangement with us in Adair Village of having 4 days a week and go to Adair Village 1 day a week, him or her, whoever the new planner might be. And so if you know of anybody who's a great city planner, send them our way, send them to the website, and that's posted. And hopefully we only lose a couple months in this transition. So I will be your point of contact on all things planning going forward for the next little bit. Hopefully the next little bit. Hopefully it's only a little bit.
And the recruitment then?
We started the recruitment this week, or late last week.
We'll jump into the comments.
Jump in. Somebody got a comment on the first page?
The only edits the maximum lot area on this first page right now.
Yeah, maximum lot coverage, and it was just a, used to be in the table, and I just don't see the value of sending you a table that's on the next page.
Top of the next page, rear yard setbacks, I'm confused. The minimum rear yard has gone to 15 to 0, but no more than 6. But now you're saying for alley access lots.
Yeah.
Okay. But we're not talking about your rear yard setbacks at all about any of the others. You're wanting to use the table to define that? Is that your intent? Non-alley access lots?
Can I just first ask what it's saying here? Because I don't understand the language. Minimum shall be 0, but no more than 6. Does that mean the minimum shall be 0 and the maximum
Shall be 6. But this is when it's coming off of the alley. Sorry, let me backtrack a little bit.
And why you
I
have
think
a
it
maximum?
sorry, I think that's in the copy paste job. The one we want to look at is in the after the table. So this whole section here. I think it's copied again, 1835, 50. Or just printed in order.
Not just printed out of order.
No, it's printed in reverse order.
Oh, that makes sense.
Agenda 372, 1835 organized districts, that's the start.
Let's start with the table.
Let's start with the back and work our way forward.
Was it stapled backwards?
Mine is.
Backwards.
Printing, just have the printer.
Yeah, it doesn't work when you're merging everything together, but
Okay, Ruth may have put them upside down when she needs to be cut and assembling on Friday afternoon.
It was late.
yeah.
All is forgiven. We
Start
understand what's happening.
The actual first page, the last.
1835 and purpose. One of the first changes you'll see is just being more uniform in our use of single unit and multi-unit as opposed to single family, multifamily. That's to comply with how state is coming out and it's just more consistent, so.
Yes. Let's have multiple people that are definitely not.
Yes, so then we go right to the table with the residential district standards. We can on the page, and then after the table, essentially better define those things that we're finding in the table in each of those sections.
Let me reread this now.
So I'll highlight kind of big changes. Again, don't let me over talk here, but units per acre is significantly smaller. Now we're 5 to 6, so it definitely adds to the density. We're dropping from 7,000 to 5,000 for a single unit. Maximum lot size is still the 10. Right now we're at 10,005. So again, it was still very possible to build a subdivision very much like a typical low density residential development that you can build today. So if that's the market and that's what somebody wants to come in and build, Hayden Homes or a Horton or a whoever, they want to come in, they have what they like to build, single unit residential, 2,500 square foot houses, they can still come in and do that in our R1. So there's nothing that says you have to build much denser, but you can build denser in the R1. You don't have to. Minimum widths we raised from, right now it's 16 feet, which allows for flag lots. We've raised that to 40 feet to eliminate flag lots. So in the low density residential, we won't be seeing new development come in with all of these weird property lines going every which way to try to maximize the impact and maximize the number of lots they can sell. They sell the lots, and then the property owner, they're stuck with these weird backyards and front yards and side yards every which way. So this will hopefully help standardize these neighborhoods a little bit.
What about non-square shaped lots?
And they'll hit that maximum 10,000 square foot. So
They'll come here.
yeah, they'll come here and ask for variance because they've got a slope or they've got some other constraint. Yeah. So it'll take a little creativity, but right now we're seeing that abundance of over creativity, which is part of the problem right now.
There's some houses that have really large backyards that you could easily make into a flag lot.
But you can also look at the zoning and you may be able to turn it into a duplex or a triplex.
And that's probably what should be done.
Right.
For what we want to promote.
Right.
But the way it is now, they can put an ADU back there.
Right.
So, they still have options.
Right. So, one of the things we're finding right now, and I'll note our guest in the audience, is right now we're also finding in our zoning, I believe your office residential, your commercial right now?
It's R2.
It's R2. So in the R2 with a duplex on it, there's room for an ADU, but there's no outright allowed permission for an ADU to a multifamily or to a duplex. It's only for single unit residential that the state requires construction of ADU. So that's one of the things, again, in our code. There too, we're going to allow for that based on square footage, not based on what's already there, right? So this is going to allow for more flexibility. What's that?
You said it's going to allow for
more flexibility and higher densities within those properties where right now it's not allowed.
like, is that measured by lot size or compared to square footage total, including the ADU?
It's based on lot size, not the size of the ADU. It's based on lot size and the type of the development going in. So if you look at, say, a duplex, or say, just look at the duplex in the R2, maximum, minimum lot size is 4,000 for a duplex. So if you want to put a duplex on a R2 property, you have to have at least 4,000 square feet. Significantly smaller than what's required right now.
Right.
I believe right now it's 8,000 because it's 5 for a
7 or 8.
or it's 6, or I think it's 85 actually. I think it's 8,500 for a duplex right now.
Okay.
So It allows for density, if you wanna go to the triplex, 4,500 square feet, which is in line with our townhome and the cottage, well, not much, but aligned with the townhome as well, in that area. So depending on what you're gonna put in the R2, that's what's dictating how many square feet the lot needs to be. But once you start going to the R2 and you start looking at 2 to 3 units, the size of that square footage of the lot comes down pretty dramatically. So you can get some pretty high densities on duplexes and triplexes and townhomes.
But we're talking about adding an ADU, right, to one of these lots.
So an
Would
80,
that be determined by the total square footage on the lot? The total square footage of the buildings, both? ADU and the duplex?
Lot coverage is what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
lot.
yes, so there's some language in the ADU, which we haven't got to yet, that sets that up. Well, my vision for that is the ADU will essentially be an additional dwelling unit. It may be detached, it may be attached, but it's gonna be taking it from a duplex to a triplex, right? So
Detached
from
triplex.
2 units to 3 units, and so you're gonna say, okay, to get a triplex on this lot, we need at least 4,500 square feet.
Okay.
Versus right now, you have to have 8,500 square foot plus an additional 2,500 square feet for that third dwelling unit. That's the constraint right now, right? And so you're talking, what math did I just say? What the total out for the triplex? 25 plus the,
It's like 11,000 or right around the 10.5.
right, and instead we're dropping it down to 4,500. So again, we can get a lot more density, a lot more housing in the same amount of space. And again, that's the minimum, so it can be larger than that, right? Maximum goes up to 12. So you can still do the 11,500 with the 3 units, but you can go down to 4,500.
So it covers all conditions under the old code and updates it to allow a lot more
So
flexibility.
you look across the board, our maximum lot sizes, and this is where we differ from, I would say, cities in the metro, even King City that we were looking at, they're forcing the higher densities by reducing those maximum lot sizes, right? Those maximum lot sizes are what have shrunk way down, as well as the minimums. On ours, we're keeping our minimums down, so it's allowed, but we're keeping the maximums up a little bit bigger, so you can choose to still have a little bit bigger backyard than what you would otherwise have, et cetera, et cetera. So
That's what I love
it's
about
a balance. It's a balance.
Does some of that information, does that work with this stuff? I mean, it doesn't seem like it does. I mean, but
Yeah, when you look at some of the sample homes in there, I think some of those look like homes that you'd find in Seattle or something,
well,
right?
true, right.
But with the, with different, different building materials, et cetera, the footprint is still there. And there were lots of examples of units that were 15 feet wide. So if you're 15 feet wide and you got, 5 foot setback on one side, and you got another unit and another unit, I mean, you can
You
get
could
there
squeeze them
pretty
in there.
easily.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking 45 feet for.
Well, and I was more thinking of that maximum. Right. Not forcing the smaller stuff.
And that's not gonna look any different than what's allowed right now, so
Right.
that won't be a constraint for people. So, what I was really trying to get with the code was, again, allowing property owners in the R2 the opportunity to convert their single family into a duplex, or to tear the house down and split it down the middle and turn it into 2 separate tax lots with a townhome, or 2 separate lots, right? So it just gives a little bit more flexibility for some of this infill, which is the buzzword we keep saying, is we want this infill, because with infill, you don't have to build new streets, you don't have to put in new water lines, you don't have to put in new sewer lines. There's no real expense to get in that additional house compared to like a brand new subdivision goes in. So we definitely want to allow property owners to infill, to do this natural infill, but we want it to be on their terms, not on the city's terms. And we want it to look and mesh and feel like the rest of the neighborhood still, right? And so again, there's just kind of this balance there. But you'll see more variety in the R2 than what the R2 allows for today.
In reference to the ADU side of the equation, would that term even just go away? Because you're talking about duplexes and
No,
triplexes.
it's defined in the state, but it's a dwelling unit. And again, we're talking about how many dwelling units, and we allow for dwelling units to be attached or not attached.
Right, but I mean, do we care who lives there? I mean, if it's rented or it's.
The state law doesn't allow us to
mother-in-law.
care about that anymore. We have that in our current ADU standards, but the state came in and trumped that about a year after we implemented it.
And we're not to that language yet, right?
We're not, no,
So
the
we'll
ADU
talk
stuff,
about
in there, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think so. Maybe we touched it. I don't think so. I think I worked on it, but maybe it did make it cut into this section, yeah. Didn't get it coming up.
So isn't there a conflict between the minimum units per acre and the min and max lot sizes? Why is it there?
Well, it's a guide. We can really get rid of minimum units per acre.
Yeah.
It's a guide other than when you get to the R3, because on the R3, that's where we said there is a minimum number of units per acre. On the others, it serves as a guide. 8 would be,
30,000 square feet.
yeah, I mean, 8's gonna encourage that, so I mean,
But
yes.
you can, at 10,000 square feet, you can get 5.
Right. This would encourage more than the
I think
10,000
min and
square
max
foot
are the
lots.
only, well, but at 8, it's 5,400, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
So
the
it's
effective
forcing it more.
maximum becomes way less than 10.
Yeah.
So that shouldn't be a requirement that any individual landowner has to meet.
Well, it would be for a developer, wouldn't it?
No,
It'd be
not,
this table's for anybody.
I would argue that we don't have a minimum units per acre with the exception of the R3. The other one's just the square footages of the sites that we've defined is defining it. In R3, we don't have a maximum lot size, we don't have a minimum width.
We
We
could
don't have any of
choose,
that, so the only governing is going to be the 24 units per acre minimum.
well, we could choose to put it there for mobile home parks, manufactured home park, or cottage cluster or townhome.
Yeah.
There could be a reason for that, I don't know,
Yeah.
but not for any of the others.
And those were the 3 I was really keying in on. And again, the King City was where I kind of referenced and started this chart, and they do have that in there. So I kind of started there, but as I got to finding the other things, I landed the same spot you were. I was like, these really kind of start conflicting with each other.
So we should just put a dash in the first 5 boxes there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
The front yard setbacks in the R1 going down, it's down to 10 feet from 15. Is that part of what you experienced from King City?
No. Well, yes. Except theirs is even shorter. I think they go down to like 5 or something, and
In an R1?
in R1 even, and I think that's with like rear access to the garage, like rear alley access, which I get, but again, in the R1, I was trying to avoid such a discrepancy, right? We have existing neighborhoods, you got an empty lot, and somebody's gonna come in and go out. We have a whole section in our code, I think I deleted, about you've gotta be like the average of the adjacent pre-existing, and it just gets so confusing. I thought, let's just drop it to 8, which is closer than what it is now. It allows you, when you get in that 5,000 square foot lot,
You mean
if
10?
Yeah.
well, if you get down to the 5,000 square foot lot, then that gives you that much more room for the size of your house, because you don't have to be the full 15-foot back. You can be up a little closer.
And we're still,
You said 8, but it says 10 setback.
that's,
Oh, 10, yes.
yeah,
I was going.
your
I was
8
probably
in
close.
there where you have a porch.
Right.
That's where your 8 came
8
from.
was the porch, right? So,
Yeah, okay.
Minimum with a porch.
yeah, I was thinking porch, because that number got moved as well.
Yeah.
And we're gonna hold the 20 feet for the garage.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
We don't only, if you don't, then you have vehicles sticking out over the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that 20 foot in front has gotta be there. If you got a little car, great, you can park 2 of them.
Now, we're increasing the rear yard to 20 from 15.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a questionable one. I again was looking for I'll say family, pet friendly neighborhood still. And I think if you start squishing that in more, right now we're at 15. We can keep it at 15. I bumped it out a little bit more just to make sure that we're not Well, so the concession there was to readjust our lot coverage numbers. So if you're gonna relook and recalculate your lot coverage numbers, if you have a hard, fast front yard setback and a little bit bigger backyard setback, then the lot coverage numbers may be able to just go away. Because really what's important in lot coverage is how close you are to all of the neighbors and how much landscaping and all of that you got. So if every housing unit had an additional 5 feet in the backyard required, then those coverage issues are important.
Then we talked in length about the lot coverage. The 75, did that come from another reference?
Yeah, that was closer to what Falls City was, or King City, sorry.
And they have similar setbacks to what you're proposing in those zones?
Yeah, I would say their setbacks are even smaller than ours are.
Yeah, which means you would get more lot coverage. I'm
And they're-
wondering whether 75 is too high.
Yeah, it was proportional. Their lot coverage were proportional to that, so they were,
They were like 80 or something?
yeah, they were
Okay.
at 80 across the board. I think up here they came up to 85 on the others, so it was proportional what they'd done. Again, I was not trying to go so extreme, but definitely allow for a smaller lot with a larger home on that lot, or a normal size home, but a smaller lot so you can get more of the lots in there.
So the rear yard setback, and side yard for that matter, the setback exceptions, there's a couple of feet for architectural features that you can,
Yeah, that's typical overhangs and that kind of thing.
what about like sheds and those sorts of things?
Yeah, so I didn't find that later.
Those are usually exempt anyway from the setbacks.
Well, they are, but in here I'm making them not exempt. So I say on the second paragraph of 1835-30, the last line, the setback standards apply to all primary structures and accessory structures, including those that may not require a building permit, such as small utility or garden shed. So
Put that one in there, didn't you?
20 feet seems a lot.
That seems to be whatever,
Do
yeah.
not allow any sort of secondary thing.
Isn't there a square footage requirement that you gotta stay under 120 square feet,
So
140
building
square
height is
feet?
200 square feet. So anything less than 200 square feet doesn't require any type of a building permit for.
20 by 10. That's pretty big, actually.
It is, that's the size of my shop.
Yeah, that's a garage.
Yeah.
But something in the 160 range or the 140 range, a tough shed that somebody wants to put in their backyard for a garden shed or a greenhouse,
Yeah.
forcing them to put that into the setback, I don't go along with that one.
And we could look at that a little bit more. The concern is if lots get narrowed and then you start adding in the utility sheds, it's still, well, a couple things. One, there's nothing in our code currently that prevents anybody from having 6 utility sheds side by side by side by side by side.
Okay, well, we can fix that.
So we can fix that somehow, right? But if it's not required, then you just limit the number of them. Well, how do we know?
Number or a max.
Limit the total number of square footage of accessory structure within a
Yeah.
yard.
So then the other problem is you've got one up against the fence and the neighbor has one right up against their fence, and all of a sudden you've got essentially a structure with no fire protection between the two, and they're right against each other against the fence line.
So
That's allowed in our code today, and there's nothing we do to stop that because
It's put down, that's all right.
That's
And your fence.
not unusual.
And your fence, as long as it's not by the house, right?
so that was the concern there, and I was thinking more side yard, the 5 foot, than I was thinking the backyard at the 20 feet.
Yeah.
I mean, 20 foot for the primary structure makes sense to me. I agree it doesn't make sense for the accessory structure, regardless of the size of it.
So does accessory structures need its own setback?
Is it what?
Does accessory structures need its own section for its own setback?
Well,
3 feet, 5 feet, whatever, fire.
Makes sense.
it's really tough to regulate.
You start creating, actually, if you put an accessory building, let's say you put it at the 5 foot side yard setback.
Sure.
You now created this 5 foot space between it and the fence it becomes nothing but a weed hole.
You're right. But it's not a fire hazard.
Yeah, but the
per
fire,
code.
but the reality,
What's the bigger concern?
I don't see a concern with having to do with the fire.
Okay.
Because, legally, you're not supposed to store certain things in there.
Well,
In reality, you do, okay? But the reality is when was the last time there was a shed that went on fire around here because of something being stored in it?
oh,
it's
don't
not
say
a-
that out loud.
No, I know, I understand what you're saying, but the reality is that there's a reason why the building code does not apply to a building under 200 square feet, and there are exemptions that are put into the building code to allow you to do things like this.
Yep.
That is the model code for the country. So I don't see us saying, no, you can't do it, when the model code of the country says, yeah, you can.
And tough sheds aren't sold with firewalls.
No.
Yeah.
Well,
All right,
well,
you can
the
make-
reality too is you put a house 4 feet away from a property line, technically, you gotta, if you're really splitting hairs, and you got another one 4 feet away, okay, you're less than 10 feet. You have an imaginary property line between the two at 4 feet. Both of those walls can't have openings in them.
Okay, so follow that same line of reasoning about an accessory dwelling unit.
Well, I'm not saying accessory dwelling unit then is that's why we have, in our code, we have a 10-foot separation between the buildings. Because you have an imaginary property line at 5 feet between each of the buildings. Because if there is no property line, for the fire code, you define that. Then you go back to a type 5 building, and I'd have to go back and look at it, but I believe at 5 feet, there's no, the openings are unprotected, and there's no fire separation required. That's where that 10 feet comes from out of the building code that we have in our planning code.
I think fire code's 8 feet, but we do 5 and 5 on either side and give ourselves 10. But, so you're good with a 5-foot side yard setback for an ADU. What about the 20 feet backyard setback for the ADU?
He's asking me a question because I have an ADU.
It's 15 feet, it's 15
And I've
feet
been
right
down
now.
this path. Personally, I think you would be limiting the ability to put an ADU on there. However, if you're looking in the bigger picture of doing a McMansion, because I'll sit down and calculate somebody who wanted to do a McMansion, go all the way to the setbacks and go all the way to how many square feet building we can do under the 10,000 square foot lot, assuming that, because that's the one piece of danger, and I don't think that's going to happen here anytime soon. But I think it's yeah, I don't know.
So right now,
I know what I've looked at.
So right now, when your neighbor behind you wants to build a 2-story ADU in their backyard, they have to be at least 15 foot from the property line. This would bump it to 20 feet from the property line.
Yeah.
As opposed to the 15, right? I mean, that's the one I look at is my neighbor that shares the back fence with
Yeah.
me. How close do I want their 2-story ADU to my fence?
Yeah, and so I think we're, in an R1, we're making it, if somebody wanted to if somebody was gonna build the main house to the setbacks, yeah, they're not gonna be able to put an ADU on it as a separate structure.
Oh, yeah. That's a given.
But if you've got a 10,000 square foot lot, and you have your setbacks going all the way around, I was gonna do the calculations, I think your net area is probably about 7,500 square feet. After you take out the setbacks and you come in with a 2,000 square foot footprint, you still have plenty of space to put an ADU on it, and be 20 feet from the rear yard.
Does that meet the 75% max lot coverage?
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 75% max is a high number.
Yeah, very.
In ADU that I'm looking at putting on my piece of property, I'm at 35%, and I would argue that, considering the arrangement of the lot, it's going much larger than that is almost getting too big. So my question's always been the 75, but he put me to rest saying that's what King City has got, and he's and he's brought it down from their 80 based on their setbacks. We've got a little bit more generous setbacks. We brought it down to 75, you know, and I get what we're trying to do here. But I think to answer your question is the ADU is gonna have to stay within the setbacks as well.
So I'm looking to change what I've got here in the second one to go and include to all primary, it should just say all primary and accessory structures, instead of structures twice, requiring a building permit. So that eliminates that utility shed building, but primary and accessory structures requiring a building permit.
Yeah.
Good, I got a rise out of you. Finally got one.
What, out of me?
No, out of the group.
I didn't say nothing.
Oh, we haven't got to the
That's right.
juicy stuff.
Man, what's wrong tonight?
So, looking back at the table again, I just want to not lose track of that completely. Is there anything else that jumps out there in the single family? We've kind of talked through the setbacks, the maximum height we didn't change there. And the R2, you've got your single unit, your duplex, your triplex. Manufactured home park, I made up the number of the 2 acre minimum. I think we talked about as a planning commission when we were talking about manufactured home parks a while back, or RV parks specifically, and that 2 acre number was one that I think we were able to get some consensus around. Cluster, there's a whole section again that we added last time, and I did some more digging in there that we'll look at on cottage clusters and what that would allow for. The 5,000 square foot seemed right. Looked at several examples of smaller cottage cluster developments that look great, that work. I think that's in line with what we've envisioned.
Those are the tiny homes, that conversation I missed last time.
They can be tiny homes. They don't have to be tiny homes though.
Okay.
So a tiny home's defined by state law of anything less than 450 square feet. But there's a whole range between less than that and what could fit on a cottage cluster site. It's really more about having a centralized shared community area or common space.
But they're non-mobile.
The non-mobile, on foundations,
Okay.
These are built structures.
Okay.
Single story, they can be 2-story, they can have a single car garage or not. What you see more typically to save on costs is they'll have a shared parking area, covered or uncovered, and then they'll have walking paths that get to the center area and gets to each of the buildings.
Understood. The city would be serving these individually, water and sewer?
I don't know, I haven't thought that far ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
I
curious.
think it can go either direction. I think you could service them on one if they did a
It's not like an RV.
community land trust. I mean, I could see them set up with a community land trust and an HOA
Yeah, okay.
would be pretty common, and in that case, we would just bill the one
The entity.
main, but I could also see them being set up where they can bill individual
It's not like, okay, so they're permanent. No.
permanent structures.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, the only place where we'd really be looking at any type of a tiny house on axles, I mean, it's a mobile, like a RV, right? I mean, we really do treat it like a recreational vehicle, so they're allowed in the RV parks, but we don't have any language that talks about any type of a setup where you can have a temporary manufactured home or prefabricated home on an axle that can come and go on a daily, monthly, weekly basis. So we don't have any of that outside of our RV park language.
Well, manufactured home park has some of that language there.
Manufactured home parks typically also require you to be on foundation, and but they can often include separate spaces for short-term stay, which will allow for RVs and that kind of bit. But that gets approved as part of this manufactured home park. It's given because they've gotten approval for a small number of more transit spaces. So again, if that's something that we're interested in doing more of, it's something we need to find a way to filter into here. And I think we'd still want to have some type of a minimum lot size, kind of like the, manufactured home park, and maybe it's similar to that, but it would allow for more transient use, but
Well, even for that number, I feel like if we're just gonna throw something out there, we could do a little bit of research, neighboring communities and see, you know, what standards are, you know, what other communities have written in and, rather than just kind of sticking our thumb in the air.
no, there's model language out there from other communities that have
That's where-
tiny home parks.
Okay.
It's a different land use, right? There's a little more coming and going. It's a little more unsteady. It's not a bad thing either way. It's just there's different design standards, and so that's something we could roll into here if that's something we were interested in doing. At the last meeting, there was discussion about what is the definition of a tiny home and what does that even look like, and so there's state provisions in there that I think Tim referenced to, and it's 450 square foot or less, has to be set up for permanent dwelling, as in it's a living space with sleeping quarters.
I understand all that. That's not really my point, is that for this table, if you tell me that you've done your due diligence, then I believe you. But you kind of made comments that like, looks close enough. So are we pulling this 2 acres and the 5,000 for cottage cluster from other ordinances that have these built in their territories? Or is this kind of like a best guesstimate?
No, the 2 acres is from conversations we've had before about manufactured home parks.
Okay. So that one's good.
So that one's fine. What was your second?
Cottage cluster 5,000 minimum lot size.
That's I'd have to second guess. I believe that's in line with the King City, but I'd have to go back and double check.
Okay.
I think I was more concerned about being in line with R2 and that type of density.
Okay, I see.
I don't know that you'd want it. You don't want R2 with these, 5,000 and 4,000 square foot lots, and then you have a bigger cottage cluster,
Agreed.
right? I mean, that seems like that would not really fit within that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Nor do we really have 3 acres within R2 that would work for. But I think it was trying to just keep it to the same scale, right? And if you're still talking about a 5,000 square foot, this one that we did keep the density, the minimum units per acre to the 10, because we don't want them to be like, here's our 2 acre lot and we've got 3. It seems like that's contrary to what we'd want to do. So on that one, the minimum density I think still makes sense. The 5,000 still makes sense, and we don't have a maximum lot size there because I think that'll just be again driven by other constraints.
Yep, I agree. Okay. I'm satisfied then. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Building heights, does 30 feet get you 3 stories?
I don't think
I
so.
think that's a little short.
Yeah, it's like 2.5.
Do we want to prohibit 3-story townhomes and in denser city areas, and there's a lot of even 3-story single family detached.
It was 40 in the last iterations, the townhomes. And for duplex and triplex, and I think it's uniformly 30 now.
Yeah, so we can go up to 40 on the townhomes.
Yeah, I think we should. You want for density, that really.
Yeah, that helps. Allows you to get the garage on the first level and.
Yeah, floors above.
But we're saying we don't want 3-story single duplex, triplex. We all want those to be no more than 2 stories.
And how are those building heights measured? Like, Nebeck Hill and Hill,
It's the average grade.
the average grade.
Average grade?
I laugh because with Chase, I've spent a whole big long to do about it being different, being written differently in different places of our code and what the state says and whatever. And that's
Okay.
We can go higher on the duplex triplex. I don't know I would on a single unit, but you could go higher, or it could encourage people to go with the townhomes if they want to go 3-story. Then,
But remember, the duplex can be anywhere. So you,
yeah,
Good point.
I don't know that we want to.
Both lots, so I'm pushing 28 feet.
No, I find if it's specific to the townhomes.
Specific to the townhomes, yeah.
And then the 50, that's the part we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
that's state.
That's a 3-story apartment building.
Well, 50 is 4-story.
Yeah,
Is it
to
four?
get 4?
And that'll force the fire department to get new trucks, right?
That's right. There's the whole,
As soon as they
I
build-
went, we went through that 6 months ago. Yeah.
I remember that.
Okay, if you see other issues there, go back, otherwise I'll make the corrections we talked about tonight. I kind of cleaned up the language on building setbacks. Putting a line in there about providing larger backyards, low density neighborhoods. Added privacy. There's this whole part about extra wide sidewalks and pocket parks, which sound like it was more of a commercial district kind of thing that was tied in here, so I removed that.
On the B, on this, that's third page.
Can we adjourn for a few minutes, take a quick break?
Yeah, I do that.
Okay.
All right. 5 minutes ish.
Yes.
my kids live over there, so that's, if I'm up there, then I
That's how you
just,
come back.
I'll just come down 7.
All right, well, we're back online.
So we were at B, rear yard setbacks. The rear yard setback, so this one is specific to the alley access lots, so that's the reference here, so. The rear yard setback shall be 0 feet, but no more than 6 feet for alley access lots. For all structures, so be the garage, could be the, well, it's gonna be a garage.
But it shouldn't be, should it be no less than 6 feet for an alley access?
Well, you could be right on the property line, so 0,
Yeah.
but in no case do we want you more than 6 feet to the garage, on the garage in the rear yard.
But you can't, but can you stick the garage at 0? You can't, because you don't get the right swing into the garage.
It's how wide the alley is, so, I mean, you could make it 6, but then,
I mean, it's, do we monitor that, or do we, you know, when the garage is facing an alley?
so we have units in Corvallis that we looked at here a couple years ago. And garages are right on the property line with an alley between them,
And the alley's a 20-foot alley, or,
I believe so.
yeah, but would, if we had a 15-foot alley, or 15-foot right-of-way, or a 12-foot right-of-way, I don't know, how narrow do our right-of-ways go? Do we have 15s, or everything's at 20?
No, the fire is gonna require the minimum of 20.
Okay, well, then I'm mute. Okay.
So my question on this was actually the last sentence. The rear yard setback shall be increased 1 foot for each additional foot in height over 25 feet, but shall not be increased to more than 25 minimum rear setback.
So if your building height is 27 feet tall,
You
then
need
your
25.
setback would be increased 2 feet.
But it says more than the 25 minimum.
Right. If it wouldn't, your minimum setback wouldn't be increased to more than 25 in any case. So if you were a
30-foot tall building, which is the tallest we allow.
30-foot tall building, that's 5 feet over, so you would increase your setback to 25 feet instead of 20 feet. If it was if you were adjacent to a townhome, and the townhome was 40 feet tall,
You'd only get
we'd
25
reduce them
anyway.
10 feet back, we'd only reduce them up to the 25-foot setback.
Okay. Well, should that be not minimum and should be maximum?
You gotta refer to the table now.
Well, because 25 minimum suggests it can be more than 25.
25 foot is the minimum rear yard setback. You have to be at least 25 foot back. That's what we're telling them. They can be more than that, but the minimum we can require them is no more than 25 feet.
Yeah, I think the more than minimum kind of got me mixed up.
But going back to Gary's question and what we were talking about the alley. If you don't decide you want to put your garage 20 feet off the alley so you can park a car there, we're telling them they can't do it.
Right. If you're coming off an alley, no more than 6.
But if you do put some of the structure exactly 6 feet away, does that mean all the structure has to be exactly 6 feet away because 6 is that's a good point.
Yeah, and if you don't have a garage, you're saying I gotta put the house all the way back 6 feet from the rear property line?
Well, but it's just for alley access.
Vehicle access to the rear.
So
If you're taking vehicle access to the rear,
Go further down, we have the wonderful thing of saying residential lots do not require parking anymore. So
If
let's
you
say,
are
let's argue, let's
Well, then-
make the foolish argument that
I guess-
that particular owner does not want to park a car on their lot for some reason.
But they want their front door to be towards the alley.
no, this
No.
is specific to rear access refers to vehicle access. So we can define vehicle access, but in the development code, anywhere we're talking access, we're talking about vehicle access, not pedestrian access.
Can we put the, for alley access lots at the beginning of the sentence? So that you can't misread it to say the minimum rear yard setback is 0 feet. And then the 6 feet only applies to alley access lots.
Yep.
And I'm still bothered by no more than 6 feet. Well, that's the. Can we also say must be between 0 and 6 feet? Because you say the minimum
Sure. We can say
shall be
must
0,
between 0 and 6 feet.
and the minimum shall be no more than 6.
Or shall not exceed.
That's not what it means.
Yeah. Just as confusing as there's a minimum range between 0 and 6, or you just say that, because at that point it's not really a minimum yard setback, it's just the rear yard setback shall be between 0 to 6 feet.
Okay,
Or shall not exceed 6 feet.
yeah, there you go.
Shall be 0.
The rear yard setback shall be no greater than 6 feet.
It's fine. This only works if you get rid of the word minimum right at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. The rear yard setback shall be no more than.
You get rid of the 0 altogether.
I think I like greater better.
No greater than?
That's all it is.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Are you good with the intent there?
Yes.
Well, it has a nice symmetry because then you start the next sentence with the rear yard setback. It's very clear what each sentence is governing.
And so now on the side yard, you're taking, when the lot, it's a corner lot, it's 10 feet on both, as opposed to 15. Trying to say there.
Yes. And if you're an internal townhome, it's 0.
Well, the only one I have left is on that residential lots are not required to provide off-street parking. If you don't require it, then they don't put it there, and then nobody will have a place to park. I mean, the streets will be filled up, and you won't have any place to park.
And
Give you a phone call or a phone number for your state legislator.
And that's, and the state legislature, where we're getting that isn't just this transportation corridor. It's all lots now.
Yes.
Within the city.
Well, no, it's the transportation corridor, so it's half a mile off of the highway. But do we really want to draw a half a mile north and south and have one standard for north of that and one standard for south of that, and everything in the middle, which is going to be 80% of everything else, is a different standard?
As we get bigger, or as we grow, yeah, maybe we would do. Because I think, so you're telling me that this is state law now?
Or the transportation corridor.
Within a half a mile of a transit stop, we cannot require parking.
Which is almost the entire city.
Well, no, I mean, it is now, but
Well, but by the time
I suppose we can change it.
by the time our earth growth boundary is bigger, everything will be bigger.
Yeah.
That whole law or that whole rule is gone by then. But
Our scope to something.
I did keep my mouth shut about parking.
I reworded the language for special yards. I don't like the title special yards because it really is about distance between buildings. So I think it's really more, I probably just need a different title than special yards.
Oh, I would just make the title distance between buildings on the same lot, and that ends up being your title.
Yeah.
Just don't.
Now, does that apply to cottage clusters?
Yeah. Because the fire code's gonna drive that.
Yeah, 10 feet. I mean, they could push and say the
The
fire
building
code 10 feet and get 8, but
We're gonna have I don't want to rabbit trail with this question, but are we going to have a section in R2 that addresses cottage clusters that references distance between buildings on the same lot. No, all of it, and this is all open. This is it.
The fewer references we have going, I think the cleaner it gets and the easier to calculate.
Okey doke.
So the flag lot section, this is the part that I crossed out. We had this whole thing about mid-block lanes and encouraging the use of mid-block lanes and a series of mid-block lanes, which actually had a developer try to push, saying, well, this is one mid-block lane, and then you have another one around the corner. It turns a corner, that's another mid-block lane, and it turns a corner, it's another mid-block lane. And we'll give each of them a different name, and then no.
So we still have a section,
It's a series of mid-block lanes.
we still have section A that says mid-block lanes.
Yeah.
Where is the definition for mid-block lanes? Is this supposed to be it?
Buried within the text there. It's a lot that's developed without frontage onto a public street when the lot access is provided by.
Is that not an alley?
No, because an alley is publicly owned.
Okay, so mid-block lane is privately owned.
Can be privately owned.
Can be privately owned. I do take an issue with this last sentence about building orientation, because building orientation should be covered in the following section. Building orientation.
Yeah, it just always comes up when you're looking at mid-block lane, which is why I added it. So this is one of those from experience where
Better to have
the question that always comes up is, which is the front? Really where it comes into is, here's the mid-block lane that my neighbor just installed, and now I want to come off of it with my property. Is the street the front? And so my setbacks are 10 foot to the front yard and 5 foot to the side yards, or is this the front and I gotta be 10 foot off the front here and this is my side yard? So it comes into orientation, but it's always referred to with where the mid-block lane lies. So
Okay, that makes sense.
it's duplicated a little bit, but
So you would have, so to speak, corner lots, those block lanes, the two houses, one on either side,
two fronts.
on the main, well, no, they would, on the main road, they would be facing their side. The side would be facing.
Ideally, both of those would face the street and the mid-block lane would be utilized to go behind them.
Those would face the mid-block. Oh, okay.
I mean, there's several different ways that can be laid out, but ideally you're gonna take your frontage off of the main street. That's where you're gonna take your access. And if you're having to do a mid-block lane to get back to two properties set back behind,
It's kind of like the first two don't count. They stay facing the street.
The street they access.
I mean, ideally they're gonna take their access off of the main street, not
Sure.
the mid-block lane.
Aren't there cases where the main street might be busy with traffic and of a nature that it would be better for everyone if?
And you still want the house to front the street and they can access from the mid-block lane.
Yeah, I think the point is where they take their access. If they're taking their access from the mid-block lane, it's the front. If they're taking their access off the main street, that's the front.
Okay.
So it's about where they're getting access.
Well, my only issue was, I think it would look weird if the side of a house was facing the main street.
Right.
So that would preclude that from happening, whatever this is.
Yeah, I mean, we would look for a layout in the site plan that showed them taking access off of the street. And they're not gonna build a mid-block lane
Well,
just to access their property from the back, right? And there's some.
well, no, but yeah, the ones behind. But they could say, well, yeah, we want to. Yeah, okay.
We've dealt with this recently. We dealt with this up on Pippa Lane where we had there was a question about which access was the front and which one they were taking access from. And this language, I think, will help sort that out.
Okay, all right.
I can tell you in all honesty right now, we kind of look at it case by case. Like, does it make sense for this to be the front or does it make sense for this to be the front? We kind of look at the surrounding buildings and which way they're orientated.
Doesn't make
I get there most of the time to make sense, but sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's like, I really should go here and the owner's adamant, no, we want it to go this way. And it's like, it doesn't really So this can help in those situations.
Okay.
I'm done. Yeah. I think around. Public revisions, I'll keep working through it. Yep.
Back on the first page of that, down where it says R1 low density residential, under 18.35 it says single dwelling unit house and then duplex corner lot. Does that need to be?
Corner lot.
Corner lot needs to be removed.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Well, don't we want the LCD to say, you could have left that there and then say, no, you can't do that.
No, we just wanted, this looks great. All right, I do just want to just time frame a little bit on this. I feel like we're slugging away a little bit. Losing chase right now isn't overly helpful, but I'm scheduling time to just make sure that I'm doing this. I mean, it's still a part of everything else I've got going on, but I will continue to put time and effort into moving this along. I spent quite a bit of time on that table. There was a lot of, you can see my scratch pad, there's a lot of figures that are getting the math to work on different sized buildings. So I think going forward, the rest of this is code language that we've looked at already. And so I've got the stuff that we did with Pat before kind of on the side on one screen. And then I've got our current code and I'm just kind of going through and just, I remember talking about this, these were the changes, and just making sure our current code talks about that. So not that it will go a lot quicker, but it will go a little bit quicker going forward because it's really just dealing with a lot of the narrative that we've already talked through. And that commercial side of things, on the residential, it's things that Pat and I have talked about for years about needing to be tweaked and changed. For example, the redlining stuff I did in that section we just covered. This page as I did on doing the table. I mean, this goes pretty quick for me to go through and just make edits and tweak it because I've been doing this for 10 years and I've got a good feel for where I think the code needs to be clarified a little bit. So going forward, we'll have more of this, and yeah, I'll bring it back to you in hopefully larger chunks.
So I did, just before we close, I want to just take this conversation from the mid-block lane to the building orientation part. I think it might be a good idea to put the in here. The building orientation section is pretty direct and, you know, number 2 down here, all buildings shall have their primary entrance oriented to the street. But we just said that's not true.
Or mid-block lane.
Or mid-block lane, but I mean, the idea is that the building orients towards the street or road, mid-block lane, alleyway, whatever that it accesses from.
And that language doesn't work if it's a rear access
Yes.
residence, so I'll put a big circle and question mark and I'll kind of look at that a little bit. Okay. I'll bring some back. I get your point.
Yeah.
Just make sure it's consistent. Okay. That's all for that agenda item.
Yes. Can we look at the map?
Yeah, so the map. I'll have to pull it up again, sorry, since my computer died. Yeah.
Or negative.
Good.
No, it was not planning commission related.
Hey, the co-host. Keep my audio. Turn off my camera. Okay, so here's our lovely map. These have been updated. I want to thank Steve Walker, our GIS. Always nice. So again, you can just, well, before I go there, so the area has its own layer now. Alright, that. Gonna get rid of the closed captioning, otherwise it's gonna be a problem. So we have our climate friendly area. You're free to hop on that and toggle, see where we're looking there. I'll turn that back off for now, but it's there. And then we've still got our, this is kind of a nice view because the shading doesn't get in the way. You kind of do have to move around a little bit to get it to work, but at least let you know when you come back out, there's quite a few zone changes that we're proposing, so that's significant.
Which layer is that?
It's right here. It's called Proposed Zoning Change Boundary, updated May 2024.
Okay, but how you got it, just as the outline?
Just as the outline there. Yeah. So you just toggle that on and off, and then you can add to it the layer with the actual shading, which is right below it,
Okay.
which is that. So this is proposed on here as well. So you can see everything that's in there, all of the residential we looked at. And again, if you want to get real fancy, you can add the climate friendly back in. You can kind of see the zones that it overlaps. There are 3 proposed C1 lots that are outside of the climate friendly area. So I'd caught that when Justin had mentioned that all of our C1 is within the climate friendly area. Well, that's true until you look at our proposed zoning and we bumped out a little bit. So we may need to look at some language in the C1 to make sure we're compliant with state law, not just climate friendly area.
Or we could just bump over and get it.
Or we just bump over and get it. Yeah.
Put it as part of the island area? Yeah, at this point, why
I don't
not?
know which one's better, I just,
Well,
logically, you could do either one.
I would argue go put it into the climate friendly at this point.
With that in mind, I just want to read this from the agenda. Following this review, okay, well, maybe I should just read background for this section. The commission has been reviewing the zone map, making a recommendation for potential amendments. This is the most up-to-date version for our review. If there's any additional changes commission would like to consider, there will be time at this meeting to finalize those conversations. Some conversation about the climate-friendly area, equitable area proposed boundary may also be appropriate. Following this review, the commission should give final direction to staff to prepare maps for presentation to the public at future public outreach events and opportunities in order to gather input. Public hearings will be set once development code revisions are complete, and then planning commission will make final recommendations to the city council. So, kind of sounds like this is it for the map. But
For a public presentation.
before we take it to the public, but our conversation tonight kind of sounds like we're not really sure we want to locate the climate-friendly area right there.
Yeah, so I just mean the zoning map, not the climate friendly area.
Okay.
I think that's a continued conversation.
Understood.
I'm looking for some finality here. We're gonna focus on the language of the code, but I think we've talked a lot about specific lots, specific areas, specific properties. So it'd be good to be able to tell Steve and kind of finalize this, again, at least until we get to public input, and then we'll have potentially some additional minor modifications to it. But I'd like to at least just know that we're good here, and we don't need to address it in additional meetings at least until we're ready with the code language that we can then mirror and prepare. I'm really trying to push to get this out in front of the public, because we want to do that before we even set public hearing dates, right? We want to have some time at farmer's market and other things. So I don't want to say I'm in like a 1 month, 2 month kind of thing, but I'm kind of thinking like over the next few months, I'd like to get to where we're feeling pretty good about our code language and where we've gotten, that we can start floating in front of people. So if I didn't mean to sound overly final here, but it's like, it would be nice not have to talk about this and prepare this for next month's agenda, right? Or 2 weeks agenda, right? So I can focus on the code and not have to focus on this. Comfortable where it is, the great. If there's things we need to tweak, then let me know and we'll tweak it. But
I thought we, on 19th Street and College, I thought we was gonna leave the one on the northwest corner residential.
both of those we were going to do residential.
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna be resident.
Right.
And I did, not to make excuses, I did provide him a printout of this, and I kind of slapped labels on top of it, so it might have just been.
No.
Doesn't matter.
Fine, check.
I have a question on Applegate between 11th and 13th. Can you take a look at that?
13th and where?
11th and 13th in Applegate.
And I was gonna suggest something there too.
Yeah. Okay. The lot there that's C2 that fronts on Applegate between 11th and 12th, excuse me. I said 13th, didn't I? I apologize. That one that's C2 there, in that kind of climate area and downtown and whatever else, I don't remember what's sitting on that right now. Is that, one of those a vacant lot right now?
Yep.
Is that was where there was a possibility of somebody doing something and it didn't work out?
Right, it's the restaurant. And then on the left side, there's 2 houses there. And also by that, on the right side, there's that, I don't even know what it is now. It used to be a,
That inverted L-shaped building.
Yeah. Well,
no, he's talking about on the north side of the road.
on the north side. I'm talking about the north side, across from us right here, basically, right?
Yeah, up there.
Right, yeah.
I'm just gonna throw this against the wall and see what sticks of it, is turning that to C1 as well. And making that entire square block C1. And giving the opportunity in the future to have not just 2 blocks along Applegate of C1, but actually 3 blocks of C1, especially if we're going to, especially since the last one's really McDonald's. And especially since the CFA is going to be right on that border anyway, and may end up actually putting that into the CFA. Actually, that isn't what I thought it was. Fully developed lots. So I would throw out turning that into a C1 as well and making an entire.
Oh, yeah, that's not where
Huh?
No.
Is that where you were going?
No, but I was thinking it was the next one down.
No. Is that what, I would argue we go with C1 with that, so sometime in the future that we actually would have 3 blocks of C1 along Applegate. Say, even though the last one would be. It's just right now with 1 block of C1 there, which happens to be Pioneer, it really doesn't do anything. And since Pioneer may never move, maybe it's a moot point as well. Because in our talks about the CFA, even though I don't want to get into it, we were talking about, why don't we tie the city hall into it? Why don't we tie this and that into it? And That was what I threw out at that point, but rethinking it, it makes no sense. If we don't create a C1, at least look at doing that C1 in that block.
So right now, 3/4 of it is houses, or partly duplexes.
Yeah, you've got two duplexes
You
along
do
the,
duplexes and then 2 houses. And then the other 2 are commercial, well, office on the corner.
that's office, and this is zoned commercial. And it's got a,
Speech therapy.
it used to be speech therapy.
Oh, not now.
Yeah.
Oh. Kind of used office wise, or is it? But
Yeah.
an office.
It's kind of in between right now. There was a land use approval for accessory dwelling, with the primary business going in the front.
Oh.
And that got approved and installed and they moved in, and then the business in the front has never really taken off the ground. So right now it's residential use only, but the approval is for residential as an accessory and the primary being out front. We just haven't seen that. Haven't been able to land a business out front. I guess that's the easy way to say it.
So across the street is Corvallis Clinic, right? Between 14 and 15.
That's the old one, the old building.
The old building.
Empty building.
Empty now.
Yeah, and you got Meeting Place up here, and you've got Les and Bob's. I take your point. I think it's a little bit of a hard sell just with the current development that's there, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking out 20 years, but this is on Main Street are tough, you know, I mean, those have got good renters in there, and it's probably,
Well, I don't think the current owners are gonna do anything with it, but when it turns over sometime in the future, that's, if that's what we want.
If the area takes off and there's pressure and there's financial incentive to redevelop.
And if not, it's gonna stay residential, because it's pre-existing.
okay, anybody else have any objections or agreement with that?
Well, it makes sense in the sense of a C1, what we would want in a C1 essentially is commercial all the way around the block.
Yeah, I think it's a good
agree
idea.
also.
I mean, I would agree that it's probably not gonna change
It's not gonna change in our lifetime.
anytime soon.
Yeah.
But then on the side, I don't know if that was what you were alluding to with the people that live there. Oh, they're gonna change my zoning? Am I gonna have to move? Well, there's all that too.
Well, that's gonna be an education.
Yeah, that's.
That's part of the public
Farmers
education.
market.
Yeah, that's gonna be the fun part. How long, at least for myself, it's taken me a while to get my head around
But I
it,
don't
to
own that
understand
building.
what's going on, you know? And saying, okay, how's that gonna affect somebody?
Somebody that's there now. Exactly.
It's gonna, there's gonna be so many questions on this.
Planning commission.
Yes.
Yeah, we're just planning for the future.
So, just south of 14th and Applegate, there's some existing apartment buildings
Yeah, that's at C3.
right there, yes. But the zoning is, R2. And I thought for the most part, we were trying to make the zoning match the use. I don't have a strong,
High density.
and it is high density now, so.
Yeah, I'd have to actually look at their number of units in there.
There's a lot of wetlands in there.
Below.
And
to the
below,
ground.
definitely below. You definitely got a little bit higher density here. I think this is a duplex, if I remember right. Yeah, I'm not sure. There's definitely some higher densities.
Yeah, there's.
Those are
that-
apartment
in the
buildings.
back, there's
Yeah, right
4
through
of them.
there.
Yeah, these,
That,
oh.
that
4
property.
units- No, 8 units each.
And that property is
two-story.
jerry-rigged around that, is it not?
What's that?
The actual property lines is jerry-rigged around those buildings based on the,
No, it's just,
the wetlands that's there. So it's pretty high density if you take the lot that it's sitting on in those
So what are
buildings.
those green lines?
So these are the tax lot lines, so
Oh,
a lot of
yeah.
these are, some of them are individually owned, like this has got a different owner.
Oh.
That's a separate owner, this is a separate owner.
Look
This
at
is
that.
all
A lot
one
of Bob
tax
Street.
lot with
A
all
lot
the
of Bob
wetlands.
Street buildings.
This one's got the wetlands that were referred to earlier and then the access, so that's all one separate tax lot from the building. I can't speak a lot to ownership without looking at it a bit. I can look at the density and see if it's gonna meet the, what do we say, 25 units per, or 24 units per acre. I can do some math and see if it
I don't
fits.
think it's that dense.
We have had a lot of,
Like 12 units in each of those buildings.
we've had a lot of interest in this empty space here. By the slot, it's already maxed out at the allowed density today's standards. With the new standards, even at R2, they'd probably be able to build more units over here. With the new standards in there without even having to change it from C2.
well, and that half there, half of that, or at least is, maybe it's all of it, is in the climate friendly area we put it in. So they should, if, once it's there, they could add on to it anyway. Just,
Okay.
Yeah, it stays there.
right,
Now, I was wondering about the little tiny green strips of public. Is that a mistake or is there something in there? You turn off the climate friendly and turn on the,
Oh, and that lots, next to those lots we were just talking about?
yeah,
It's kind of weird.
there's strips of green.
Those are public. They're showing up public for some reason. I think the city owns a storm water easement through here and
Yeah.
a little pocket park up here. So,
Alright,
yeah, he's just got them as a included with the public layer.
alright. And then the last comment is there a reason we didn't switch Clemens to public with this map here?
Yeah, that's, those two changes on 19th and College
Primary.
got me thinking those updates from that meeting didn't come through in the GIS.
Well, some of the things that did. Clemens Primary School,
Oh, Clemens
On
Primary
19th.
School.
19th.
it still shows
Yeah, R1.
R1.
Yeah, it just didn't get captured. I was thinking the mill, the
Yeah, no, sorry.
Clemens Primary School.
P.
wasn't that what's there in that P right now?
No, that's the middle school and the high school.
This is high school. Clemens Primary's right here.
Oh. I was looking at the elementary school.
Was the high school briefly.
And I think we talked about dropping the R2 down here. This is the,
Yeah.
UAC.
Yeah, we did.
But that's
But they
Special
own the
use,
other one
right?
too, that, both those.
they own both. I mean, there'll be a conditional use either way, but I think we're just trying to avoid having this one little lot of R1.
Yeah. We don't want one lot of R1 in the middle of everything else.
Clemens doesn't own PYAC though.
No, I mean, the PYC owns the lot.
They own two lots.
Right.
So then similar question about the rodeo grounds. Did that all, the city owned part, did we change that? Okay.
Yep. Well, just go through it. You can do it on your own, but if you have trouble getting on the map, let me know again. And again, I'm more than happy to sit on the computer. If you want to come in, I could kind of help you look through and toggle stuff if that's helpful. But I definitely want you to feel comfortable being able to go on and look through it. So let me know in the next week or so if you have other changes there, and I'll make those, especially if they're ones that we've talked about already. But otherwise, we'll just plan to make these final ones and then kind of put it on the shelf until we're ready for the call the code. Okay, thank you for your feedback.
So, the next meeting is in 2 weeks. Are there any other staff update?
No, do the staff update, regular third meeting. Right. Yeah, so I guess if I need a goal, it's to try to get through the rest of the residential section. As far as I'll get, just try to get through the rest of residential. Talk through that one more time. It definitely helps if you read through the packets ahead of time and come with stuff circled and highlighted, and then we can kind of just focus on those areas of concern, and I don't feel like I need to kind of cover everything that we all agreed to. So I'll try to get packets out on Thursday instead of Friday. We just got behind this last week. If you didn't have an opportunity to read through some of the links that I sent, it's interesting reading. It definitely helps you kind of get your mind around kind of the more dense housing and what that could still look like. A lot of it's nice looking. I mean, it's still very nice. It's just, it's not the traditional ranch style house that we all grew up in suburbia, right? It's a very different, narrow street frontage and deep, but they're still spacious. You look at the square footage. I'm amazed when I see those. I'm like, it's 2,200 square feet. You know, it's pretty amazing. It's just a little different layout that's going to help with affordability a bit. So anyway, so I'll work on residential. Come back in 2 weeks, try to get through all that, and then we'll switch back over to that commercial industrial code, and I'll try to get that out.
Can we, and I'm just thinking out loud here, so like, what if we have that, then have as maybe part of another meeting, like the whole residential that we, with changes that we've made, kind of give it another once over, I guess.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah, no, we'll get to the point where it won't be next meeting.
No,
Next few meetings, so we'll get to the point where residential's kind of buttoned up. Again, get the level we're comfortable taking it to the public and setting a hearing date and going forth. I'll switch over and try to finish up the commercial industrial, which again, we've in large part talked about. It's just me having time to sit at the computer and meticulously go through what we talked about with Pat and what was in that code and go through our code to go through that. It's just time.
So similar to that, I think it'd be great once we go through all of the residential code, you've got all the comments and changes in. If we can get a copy, digital copy, whether it's PDF or whatever, of the whole residential code, so we can on our own time review all the changes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Redlined or?
Redline.
Red line, yeah, still.
If
The
that's
last time,
possible.
sort of. Well, I guess when we do the hearings, we would want it there too.
Yeah, it'll be there.
Yeah.
No, there's benefit to have it digitally. So, I mean, what goes in the packet typically is digital.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll have that for you. I mean,
I'm saying redlined, I think, because it'll be important for this commission to understand what we are changing so we can communicate that to the public.
Yep, yep.
Basically, over on June 17th, we have a public.
We do. June 17th, have it on your calendars. It's next month at our regular meeting. We've got a hearing set for a annexation and a zone upzone from R2 to R3.
The materials related to that are on the active land use planning page on the city's website.
The upzoning, will that meet with what we just was looking at?
I don't know. I was just gonna look at that.
I mean,
We'll know more when we get there. I don't believe so. I don't believe this is one that we looked at.
and annexation.
Well, we haven't talked about it because it's not inside city limits yet, so we haven't really talked about zoning outside city limits.
It's not a lot inside the city.
No. I think the current designation of the comp plan is medium density residential. So they want to annex and they want to go from drive to medium density to high density. And they're gonna make the case that high density residential would be a better use of the property. So. Okay. Yeah, try to make that meeting. We don't get to do those big annexation hearings very often, so. That's, those are fun staff reports to write too.
Stand adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep.